do a rate, give us some feedback after the session. That's always very helpful. And so I'd like to welcome Dr. Steve Herndon. He's the Senior Vice President for Strategic Enrollment and Management at Indiana Tech.
All right, good afternoon. I'm going to try to keep you awake. It's the 4 o'clock session. This is where about 50% of people take off early, and you guys are the troopers that are hanging around. But I think you'll enjoy this. One thing I can promise you is that as we go along, you will enjoy this more and more. Your happiness will grow because you'll be closer to happy hour every minute we go by. So just hang in with me. We'll make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, we'll make sure that you have a chance to ask me anything you want. So as I'm introduced, I'm Steve Herndon. I'm the Senior Vice President for Enrollment Management at Indiana Tech. Let me give you a quick brief about Indiana Tech so I can put this presentation into context for you a little bit. Indiana Tech is a Midwest private institution based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have about 1,500 students at our Fort Wayne campus who are your typical traditional college students playing sports. We have programs from certificate level all the way to the doctoral level. But along with that, we have had over the years a growing post-traditional base that we are approaching a little over 8,000 students with at this point. And one of the things that people know Indiana Tech for who work with, especially our corporate partners, is that we are lean and mean. We're very nimble. We move very quickly. And we've seen really rapid growth over the years. And so what I want to do is talk about a little bit about this idea of cultures of transformation and transformative cultures and how they lead to emergent strategies and the importance of emergent strategies. And the reason I find this topic important, I gave a similar discussion at the Council of Independent Colleges a couple years ago. And one of the things that institutions who are struggling with enrollments and other issues for growth areas, they brought up was, we just don't have a culture that moves quick enough. We don't have a culture that adapts quick enough to the changing environment. And so this is really something that, speaks to me really well. I come from industry. I come from the telecommunications side of things. I was at Nortel Industries for years before I came into higher ed. And the president that brought me in to grow enrollments and revenue at Indiana Tech back in 2008. And the first thing he said to me is, "You will hate higher education," which was a cool pitch, right? To get me to work there is, you will hate higher education, because it said they move slow. Every idea has to go through a bunch of committees. Everything has to run through, there needs to be a team to study everything. And then it might be 2 or 3 years before an idea is ever, brought to implementation. But that was something we worked on together to change, in our culture. So we're going to talk about that, how we changed it, and some real tactical ideas, as well as I'll give you some thoughts on opportunities that we've seen at Indiana Tech that has had a major impact on enrollments as well as revenue streams for us. Everybody is aware of this, that we're in a turbulent environment in higher education. And what I propose is, transformation and adapting to these changes in higher education require us to change. And, one of the things that I think higher education does well is we like to plan. We do a lot of planning, strategic planning. We like 5 and 10-year strategic plans. But the reality is, in higher education, we have to adapt. We have to pivot, we have to innovate, and we have to do it quickly. I really believe, though, with all the challenges out there, there's as many opportunities now for growth in higher education as there has ever been. And one thing I tell the board all the time is that post-secondary education is more in demand now than ever. And catch the term post-secondary education, because that's important. I don't say degrees are more important now than ever. But education and training and upskilling after high school is, to me, at its peak, and it's going to continue to grow. And so we'll talk about this We're going to move quickly through some slides. I'm going to talk about what a culture of transformation looks like. I'm going to talk about the importance of emergent strategies and why they're so critical. And then we're going to get really tactical and with some real world examples of how you can introduce these things into your institution at your department level, institution wide. It's just some real things that I've learned over the years to help you and higher education not only identify more opportunities, but more importantly, seize those opportunities, be able to grasp them. Because quite frankly, many of these opportunities, the shelf life is in the months and years, not necessarily in a 5 and 10-year plan. So let me start with this. Culture is conducive to continuous transformation. They're really highlighted by 4 things. One of these, first of all, is the ability to be nimble, to be agile, and to have a shared vision. The second one, and which is really important on the bottom, is that continuous learning and feedback culture. Continuous learning has to happen, and it needs to happen across the whole organization. I think what's really critical for institutions is to really empower everybody, and I don't care at any level, to learn from them and to encourage them to go out and learn. One thing I have found is most new ideas that we come up with, they happen at our department levels. We were just discussing, I have a remote campus in Southern Indiana, about 4 hours away from our main campus. We are running at this time, we have programs for 4 or 5 different companies that bring in a lot of revenue for us. And we uncovered those opportunities through those that were working at that remote campus. They just were out talking to companies saying, what do you need and how can we help? And that opens up a world of possibilities. The next one is cost management. At Indiana Tech, we're not a large university and we don't have unlimited resources. So one of the things we really focus on is making sure we invest in those opportunities that, will bring the results that we need, and things that higher education struggles with, what to divest in. We struggle in higher education. Yeah, we got some hands. We struggle in higher education to divest in programs and things that aren't meeting our mission or meeting our revenue goals or meeting our enrollment goals. And then lastly, these kind of cultures are identified by people that know the data. They're always assessing the outcomes of things. They're always looking at what's working, what's not working. Every meeting with my staff, I go and I talk to them, what's working and what's not working. Because what's not working over time, we need to move from and move into things that are productive. I'm not going to share this whole slide and walk through it. I just want to point out one big thing is transformation requires strategy and strategic decisions. And they're bigger than just incremental changes and bigger than process improvements. These are things that are disruptive at some level. And what you'll find is cultures that do this really well are always engaged in these 3 ideas of what do we stop, as we talked about before, what do we abandon, what do we sustain, what's working, what do we continue on with, and what are the new things we must start or augment. And if you would get into this habit and your institutions get in this habit of regularly going into these conversations, I think, you would find there are a lot of things that aren't working, a lot of things that are working, and uncover those things that you need to start and dive into. Transformational mindsets kind of flow from that, and they get into thinking about things. What should we start? What's the external dialogue of this? What's our internal feedback? How do we plan this? How do we quickly get to a market analysis pro forma, strategies and tactics? And most importantly, how do we move to doing? Because that's really the key step, is getting and putting these ideas into action. And here's pretty soon we'll talk about some ways to move to this quicker. One of the things that I've really found over the years is just-in-time learning is critical. Just-in-time learning. Is anybody familiar with Michael Porter? And he has this concept of deliberate strategy. You can go read about Michael Porter's deliberate strategy. We do this a lot in higher education, where if you have 5 and 10-year strategic plans, as an example, that's a deliberate strategy. Indiana Tech, we have a long-term strategic plan to 2030. So I'm not here to suggest that long-term planning isn't important. What I'm here to suggest is long-term deliberate planning gets us into motion. What's critical is to keep looking for learning moments as we go and execute a plan. You know, Clayton Christensen said, being successful with deliberate strategy is a very complicated problem for higher education. And so what we do with our strategic plan is every quarter we go through, we look at those key strategies and tactics, and we say, you know, what have we learned? What are the new opportunities that's popped up to us? What are those just-in-time learning moments that'll lead to an emergent opportunity? There's a number of examples, and I'll give you one right now. It was about a year and a half ago, we were going to work with a local university partner who had an MS in counseling. And, you know, they had the accreditation to do it. We didn't really want to seek that accreditation. So we were looking for doing some shared programming with them as part of our plan and put them into our MS of psychology and a dual degree in counseling with certification. In discussions with them, what we learned was that what they really needed and they couldn't respond to was growth in their nursing program. They had an accelerated bachelor's of science in nursing. And one of the issues they struggled with is they were a rural campus far away from many of the hospital networks that wanted and had this in demand for them. And so they came to us and said, look, I know we're talking about counseling, but here's the reality. We need a partner like you for our ABSN. Now, we have no nursing programs at Tech, but what they said was, you know how to market, you know how to recruit, and your location is right in the center of where these hospital networks are in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is a city of about 400,000 people. And so we built them a nursing classrooms, and we built nursing labs on a space of our floor that we really weren't utilizing fully. We went half and half with them, got this approved, and we launched this a year and a half ago. You can look it up. It's Indiana Tech and Huntington University ABSN program, and we have a full 50-50 revenue split. We have filled every class, and we're on a year and a half waiting list right now from our enrollment caps. That has brought in about $600,000 in additional revenue a year. We have examples of that all the time by just as we're executing a strategy, constantly looking for emergent strategies that come out of that. And sometimes you'll see it even leads to shifts of goals. So we follow what, I threw out, one idea in philosophy. We really follow more of Mintzberg's philosophy of emergent strategies. So another one, if you ever want to look up Mintzberg's theory on emergent strategies, that's really what we do at Indiana Tech. Why focus on this? Well, the key thing and the reason we want to focus on it is we're in an uncertain future, and emergent strategies fit uncertain futures. And there's a lot of changes to the competitive landscape. When I was at Indiana Tech and started 2008, we were just making that decision to move our adult programs online into 6-week online formats. And we decided not to use an OPM. We decided to hire somebody internally and build it out ourselves. We grew rapidly with this, quite frankly. All we really had to go out and say is we have classes for working adults online 6 weeks, and enrollments just flew up on us. About 2015, 16, 17, as alternative education providers and the competition got bigger, we saw those numbers start to flat and go down. And so what happened was the competitive landscape changed. And so we had to adapt again, and we had to keep going through this process of emergent strategies and new strategies to find enrollments. And so emergent strategies are critical because it really moves the emphasis to flexibility, and it moves the emphasis to opportunities and seizing those opportunities. Then last thing, we'll move into a more tactical side of this, and we can have some more dialogue, is characteristics of institutions that do this well. Number one is the first one, and don't that first one on the top, your top left, is critical. Entire organization needs to feed into strategic conversations. We regularly go around to departments and we conduct town halls with them once every quarter, just so we can ask them, what are you hearing from students? What are you hearing from employers? What are you hearing from anybody that, is in demand that we're not offering or we're not capturing? And then what you need to do is capture those things into themes, strategic themes that you can turn into emergent strategies. And what we've learned is that we move from chains of command to chains of learning. We just have mechanisms in place to have cascading information moving up and down the organization. And that just-in-time learning and sharing has just become critical for us. We've also, I think really important as you move to the bottom left, is you need a culture and ability and will to invest and to divest. If you're like us, you don't have unlimited resources, so you have to free up money from those things that aren't working to move them into things that are working. And then it really comes to speed of implementation becomes critical. And so what I always tell our board and others, I'm really less strategic, I'm more opportunistic. And I think that's a critical thing. And many of the attributes you see of a lot of these large higher education providers that seem to always launch these innovative things, they're just very opportunistic. They move very quickly. So let's get into a little bit of the practical and tactical, less theory. First thing from your left over, opportunities is discovered through volume of external dialogue and internal feedback. One of the things that we have really found is that a lot of the opportunities are sitting there with partnerships, sitting there in partnership with companies, in partnership with industries, in partnerships with other colleges and universities. But to do that, you really have to launch people out to have that dialogue. One or two people cannot do this. We, about 5 years ago, I hired my first director of strategic partnerships who only focuses that external connection out there to industry and to industry organizations. Since then, we've added similar goals to all of my adult admissions rep. I have about 25 admissions reps who work in various parts of the state. And along with admissions goals, they have goals for corporate partnerships. And we also do this with our career center. And so we're constantly building our goals and building our objectives around having these kind of strategic conversations with employers, with other groups, with other colleges, to the point that what I just recently hired was another director of education partnerships who works from the external feedback to our faculty, because that's a big piece of this is we have programming that has to take place. So I pulled a person from our faculty and I brought her over to the dark side of enrollment management, and she understands faculty culture. She understands how faculty works. She understands how to develop articulation agreements. And that's her sole role, is to take these many conversations and many requests by our industry partners and to help do things like prior learning assessment, credit for training, working with faculty on customized courses. We don't have a lot of customized programs. What we call them is we have contextualized programs, where we have found that with companies, many times you have the programs they want, they just want it delivered in their context. And so she does that and works on those things. And so I would encourage you to really think about how many people you have from your department, your organization, your institution that's out there regularly talking to external clients. And then you have to set up a mechanism to get that feedback from them. Each year we uncover multiple opportunities just from that type of work and feedback. Next one over is then what we do at Indiana Tech is we have a group solely focused on new ideas, new programs, new implementations. We call it the New Horizons Committee. One of the things that's very difficult in higher ed is that you have to move many departments to get something in place. You have to implement through various things. So in this group, we have faculty representation from the various colleges. We have financial aid, we have marketing, we have the business office, and we really try to have a group of people that their whole world is taking ideas and building feasibility studies and presenting action plans to go forward. And this group's motivated because that's part of their goal, is to have X amount of new things that we can launch and new ideas that we can approach it with. We call it New Horizons, but there's other type of groups you might call it. They also have a little subgroup of that called the Competitive Intelligence Team that does nothing but competitive analysis, look at growth in certain industries and sectors and things like that. So these are things that I would highly encourage you to do, is to make sure you got cross-departmental representation on groups that solely focus on this. Orientation to action, as we talked before, we don't think in terms of years, we think in terms of months. It's really funny. We're launching a new hybrid program in information systems that's a combination of online and it's a master's in information system online with a hybrid approach of residencies. And so we just approved this through this group, New Horizons, and now just got approved through Faculty Senate. And so the president's answer was, can we start in January? Now, I told him I need 6 months to even market this, but that's the mindset we try to keep, is that opportunity is fleeting. We only have so long. We need to launch it as soon as possible. Tight budget management and contingencies to invest. We have, like everybody else, we have an annual budget. We work off an annual budget. We have to each year free up money from things we planned that we decided not to invest in or to spend on. Many times, these are personnel decisions we make, especially if we have attrition. Sometimes I'll have somebody that we have attrition with. We take it to cabinet and we go, do we really need to backfill that position? And we've made a promise as an institution, we don't necessarily get rid of that from the budget. Is there better use? Is there better use of that human capital in other areas of opportunity? And we stay in that process all the time of thinking, how can we find contingency funds for new opportunities? What are we not going to spend that we planned on or divest from that we can now implement and use in something that's come up? That's just a regular process for us. And then one thing along with that, I always recommend, these ideas don't have to be huge. I mean, I really believe you place many small bets and you watch progress and then you double down from there. I don't recommend that many institutions just dive into multi-million-dollar projects. I'll give you an example from Indiana Tech. We did this back in 2012. We were growing rapidly and we made a decision to open a law school as law school enrollments are declining. I'll give you the end story, $38 million of sunk funds. We closed the law school in 2018. And that was a lesson learned that, you really ought to work in partnership, or you ought to work on a small scale before you fully jump into things on a large scale. Luckily, we had the funds to do that and absorb it, but for many institutions, that would have sunk them. And so, I really believe in that concept. And then just a capacity and mindset to pivot, always be ready to move. Over the last couple of years, these are just small examples of just little things, we've done. And a lot of them where we're seeing a lot of growth in this kind of opportunity is in partnerships with other universities and in partnerships with industry. That Real.edu is a really cool one. That's a company called Realcraft that one of our admissions people went out and said, what do you need and how can we help? Well, they are growing manufacturers that's seeing about 58% growth a year in their hiring needs. They went from a hiring capacity of 200 to now they have over 900 employees, and they're really wanting to hire up over 1,200. What they said was, we want to promote all of our managers and line managers from within who know the systems. But these individuals have no management and leadership experience or skills. So we run production management courses there at Realcraft. And we do this down in your area. We talked about some companies that we do this. At this point, we are now offering classes at 29 various companies. We offer classes at night for working adults on the company site, and we have enrollments of 516 students as of today in just those partnerships alone. And they're just a continual enrollment. There's other things on here, that we looked at. The Eli Lilly and the city of Fort Wayne, they wanted somebody and said, you know what, we really need an innovation center, something focused on advanced manufacturing from the secondary sector all the way to the working adult. And so there's a innovation center that we're building now, and we received $22 million from Eli Lilly to build this, simply because we just went and talked to some employers and asked them, what do you need? And Eli Lilly stepped in and said, we'll help fund that. And there's just example after example. My point of saying all of this is that, through programming, we've grown through programming, we've grown through strategic partnerships, we've grown through various initiatives simply based on opportunities. Every one of these were opportunities that we didn't plan out before the year started. These all emerged on us that we were able to pivot and move quickly upon. And quite frankly, there's nothing special about Indiana Tech. We're a small, private, pretty unknown, tuition dependent, not highly ranked, but I assure you the value we have is the speed to action, speed to pivot, speed to implementation. That is what we're known for. And it is something I think higher education and many of our institutions really need to adopt. Now, we are private. I make sure I say that. That's a difference. There's, public institutions have various levels of bureaucracy and approvals than privates do. We can, as long as we're staying within our accreditation guidelines and the DOE, we can pivot and do a lot of things very quickly and build a culture of that. All right, some tactical thoughts, and then we'll open up for any ideas. And as I said, your joy should be growing. Happy hour's closer, so we're almost there. Number one, whether you do this within your department, whether this is at the top of your institution, there needs to be expectations and empowerment for action. There needs to be an expectation that things are implemented and done. Number two, I really suggest, if you're not doing this regularly, increase your volume of external dialogue. I really believe we're in a time, especially with the adult learner, they really believe and they really want and they really expect that their education is supported, their education subsidized, that there's an immediate return for going back and getting the skills and education they need. And so working through various external groups, this is where you will find those opportunities, and you will find employers and other groups that will fund the education if you have what they need. So we work a lot with advisory groups. We work a lot with industry groups. The Indiana Manufacturing Association, as an example, we work heavily with them because we have a lot of STEM programming, especially in engineering technologies. We work heavily on them to make referrals and to set us up with companies and dialogue. We work with corporate and education providers, grant making and funding agencies, government departments, and so on and so on. There's a lot of external conversations to be had out there. And I'm telling you, the opportunities are endless here. Create mechanisms in your organization to solicit this feedback, to make sure that these are happening and get input from all over. I still believe heavily in town halls with various departments that interact with external clients and with your students. I would highly recommend, this has been very helpful for us, as you have dedicated groups to these new opportunities. Partnership specialists, cross-departmental innovation teams. You need these teams together to build buy-in, to think about, upstream and downstream needs and impacts. It's a big mistake if you're not bringing in things like your financial aid people, your registrar and others to kind of, that way you don't run into some weird obstacle or roadblock. You need, obviously, academic representation and advocates out there, because there's nothing worse than having it sitting into, some, like for us, the business college committee, and getting something stuck there. It works much better if you have an advocate who brings it up. I have found at Faculty Senate, if you have one of your faculty representatives just present a compelling case, we rarely see anything voted down. And where it does get voted down is if you don't have them involved in this from the first place. Now, that being said, let me give you a little disclaimer. Indiana Tech made a decision a long time ago. We have a faculty senate, we have shared governance, but when it comes to a lot of new opportunities, it's mostly created outside of faculty. So that may be different at your institution. You'll have to contextualize it in the way that works with your governance. It's very important to present a good business case. I've shared various conferences and things on how to do that, especially for new programs. I'm always happy if you hit me up to share with you some metrics I use and how I put together a demand analysis, how I put together a pro forma. I have pretty regimented things that go into that to kind of give you ideas of where to look, where to find that information, as well as how to put it together. I'm happy to share that with you in a template format. Be willing, always, as you're looking for new opportunities. This is the hardest thing in the world right here, is look for failed initiatives and look for things that you shouldn't be funding so you can create contingency funds. This is really difficult when it comes to, especially if you have full-time faculty dedicated to it. And so I'm not here to tell you that we every quarter go through and we start saying, this program's done, now get rid of the faculty person. That doesn't happen like that. But, we're always aware of these things. Sometimes we've been able to shift faculty over to new areas, just depending on, what their background is and where their subject matter expertise lies. Place many small bets. That little list I gave you was all within the last 2 years, and I could add about 10 more of those things. We put a lot of these little small things out there. And what we're hoping for is a handful of them really succeed, and then we will double down as long as they remain successful, and we'll start to really invest in it. And then reduce your fear of failure. Allow people to fail. Some of these things fail miserably. I fail on a lot of initiatives. I have a few international initiatives going on right now that's just not doing anything, that I'm going to have to abandon, that I talked the university into doing. But they're okay with that because there's a few of them that are doing really well. And so you really have to reduce that fear of failure. In summary, and I'd love to hear any feedback or dialogue or things that you think are obstacles to this, I'll just leave it this. Transformation requires strategic decisions and is disruptive. To be truly transformative, you'll have to disrupt things. And cultures that are good at this, that do this regularly, they're the ones that execute on ideas. They're always learning. They control cost and they know their data well. The mindset of transformation and engaging in this type of thinking will help you identify what you need to start up and what you need to stop. And transformational cultures, more importantly, they're the ones most conducive to these kind of emergent opportunities that will happen every day for you. Long-term planning is good, but they rarely get intended results. And really, opportunities emerge in most cases with learning organizations and collaborative organizations, especially with outside and external groups. And willingness is not enough. You have to foster this continual dialogue, and you have to incorporate change tactics to make these things a reality. You're at this conference and you're hearing a lot of initiatives, a lot of ideas. And, I think what's really important is that not only do you learn great ideas, because we all want to leave a conference and go, here's my list of things learned. You really, though, how many times do we go back and none of these things ever really take place? And that's what we're trying to avoid. And I'm an optimist for higher education. I always joke that higher education is kind of its own worst enemy. We talk the worst. I come from outside of higher ed originally, and for 18 years, I've kept hearing how higher education's doomed and it's done. And it's usually by people within higher education that write that in many cases. I'm here to tell you, I think the opportunities are greater now than ever. I think they're just changed. I think you need to move into a lifelong learning post-secondary education mindset away from traditional degree mindset. And I think if we would just ramp up the external dialogue and we would just ramp up conversations asking, what's your problem? How can we help? I have found that groups and companies and industries, they still need a lot of help from higher education. They do not know how to do programming in the way we know how to do programming. And they want what we have. So I want to kind of open up for any thoughts, questions, but I'll stop there and see what you all think. Thank you. But I saw you. You were like, what can I answer? Any thoughts, objections, anything that you don't agree with? Sure.
So I was wondering about your military and veteran population.
Yeah.
Do you have any emergent strategies that align to those folks?
Yeah. That's a really good question. We have right now just over 700 military and veteran students. I'll give you a couple really good ones. We're doing some things with kind of the traditional strategies. Right now, we're in we are in the approval stage with Edwards Air Force Base out close to LA. Where we're seeing the opportunity is education on base for two things. I'm going to get really tactical with you. So you can, number one is cybersecurity. We have really good post-traditional cybersecurity programs. And then we are part of the Air Force, Community College of the Air Force, and many of them still need general education courses. So we're running right now at about 5 different bases, just doing the gen ed piece for the GEM program, which is a general education mobile. Now back to another opportunity, though, we are starting to see. Are you from Indiana? Good. If you're a competitor, I'm not going to share this with you. I'm just kidding. What we're really starting to focus on now is military-friendly and veteran-owned companies. We have signed a couple because of our military presence, and we're a gold level military friendly designation. For many of you who don't know that, that's a designation you get every year. We have signed, we were just talking about one, I'll just give it to you, United States Infrastructure Company. We signed a partnership with them to run programs because they're heavy supporters of military and veterans. And another one's down in Tennessee, Hankook Tires. And so our military team, what's funny is I have 5 military recruiters scattered, usually in the Midwest and South. I'm having them now go and engage these employers because we're finding that those employers that are military friendly and they're veteran owned, they react much better to all of our military recruiters are veterans. And so we're seeing a lot in that area, and then a lot of work into support. Just a lot of support. We have now 4 military advisors just for academic advisors to help them through their studies. It's a good question. Yeah. Quarterly. Yeah. What we do every quarter as a cabinet, we have our cabinet meetings are vice presidents and deans. And what we do every quarter is we have our long-term strategic plan, but we have an annual action plan. Okay. So we take that annual action plan, which is really long. I'm telling you, it's our board, it drives them crazy. They're saying you're trying to do too much. And we disagree with them going, no, we don't know where all the fish are. So we have to throw a lot of lines in the water to figure out where they're at. So every quarter we go through that, and we actually have a little side. It's set up in this giant spreadsheet with tabs, and we just say new, continuing, or abandon. And we abandon probably about 20 to 25% of our action plans every year. Good question. No, it was really funny. The president that hired me, he retired about 7 years ago. He was very on board. He come from the Bell system, was a vice president of marketing innovation, international marketing innovation, Bell system, became a dean of business, then came into higher ed. he was tasked, and Indiana Tech at that time was really struggling financially with enrollments. In fact, Indiana Tech almost closed in the 80s and 90s. There were discussions about closing the institution. He came in 2003 or 4, I believe, met me in 2007. So he was on board originally. So the new president that come in was kind of tasked to keep revenues growing, keep us going. I mean, quite frankly, if it wasn't for the post-traditional learning and the innovative approaches we have to take, we would never make it on traditional students. In fact, our traditional student base, we have a goal of just breaking even. I mean, it really is our goal, and all of our revenue, comes really from our post-traditional. So I do have great support from the top. And the culture now with academics is really good because they are on board with that. When I presented something similar to CIC not too long ago, that was the biggest thing. The room said, it'll never happen with our faculty. And which is unfortunate. Now, there's a lot more of, these are a lot more traditional private four-year colleges, but yeah, good question. I think that's critical because everybody there knows there's an expectation to act. Yes. Yeah, we actually, it's really interesting. We've always had it. We started like a lot of universities where it was in the business college primarily. And over the years, we moved it into every area. Now our big focus is doubling down on STEM with online STEM programming. And so it goes, and all of our graduate and post-grad programs are in a, non-traditional format, either hybrid, 8 weeks or 6 weeks online. So, it was really interesting. We have a new dean of engineering, and her background's in data science and with a focus on AI. And so she brought up, we're building a master's of AI. And the first question she said, do we want to look traditional? And the president was immediate like, nope, this is either online or hybrid, no alternative. That's it. So yeah, it spans. In fact, most of our programs, we have 86, 87 programs, including certificates. And we have more in the post-traditional model than we do the traditional. There's another hand somewhere. Did I miss it? Yes. No. No. Yeah, we've, as another quick background you don't need to know, we started in 1930, and we actually began as an engineering college for working adults, and we exploded through the GI Bill back in the late 50s and 60s. So I say that to say we've kind of been a career-oriented, post-traditional, back then it was non-traditional, right? Kind of school from the start. So we've never even had a discussion about unionization. That's a whole different challenge. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I actually was meant to talk about that, but I ramble so fast, I feel like I'll run out of time. Let me talk about the undergraduate level, and I think something to really consider. And I was just at a conference with some people from Tesla, people from various Toyota, Walmart, and others. And I cannot tell you how many times they brought up frontline workers, programs for frontline workers, and prior learning credit for the training frontline workers get. If I could give you one term for undergraduates, frontline workers. In Indiana, this became such a large deal that they have what's called a Workforce Ready grant in Indiana that's for non-credentialed employees that they can have certificates paid for by the state. They were not having success with that with just using the community college system. So we worked with them about 3 years ago and developed certificates, credit-bearing certificates for frontline workers in various issues like in logistics and various computer science and engineering technology. And we got funds. We get $2 million a year from the state that'll pay for employees that want to go through that. I've seen that opportunity and that term just keep going. So if I was really recommending anything on the undergraduate side of things, I would tell you heavy into the skills, the curriculum mapping with frontline workers. And what we tend to do, there's a company we work with. I'm kind of an open book. We work with Medtronic. So we do some mapping with them of what does it take from a frontline worker to get the skills to go to the next level of, and there's still significant learning gaps in that we go in and do some of our work around. But honestly, like I said before, we have certificate programs, we have associate level degrees. We really don't have to build programs from scratch. A lot of times we just contextualize it with the same learning outcomes. And 90% of the time that's there. At the grad level, the big growth for us right now is information system, data science, and there is a real growing demand in anything related to the computer sciences we're seeing at the grad level itself. MBA for us has been declining for years, not in major chunks, but just flat and declining. And then we rolled out a STEM MBA, which gets into more of the analytics side of MBA. And that's the only area of the MBA we're seeing growth in. So for us, it's really in those STEM fields at the graduate level. And grad certificates. We do that as well, where students take 3 or 4 courses, credit bearing. They can stack them later on, but those are, we're seeing a lot of enrollments into that. The answer is no. A lot of dialogue, kind of the antithesis of what I just told you. Too much dialogue, not enough movement. That's the area where we have not moved with our faculty quick enough. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There's 2 ends of AI is really funny. When I was working with Tesla recently, they don't see AI. They see AI as just a piece of data science. There's a lot of debate with faculty on that. They kind of see they see AI as the flagship program or the parent program and data science under it. Industry tends to see data science as the flagship with AI as it's just a tool and mechanism. So while we're building a master's in AI, what a lot of the industry wants is how do our frontline workers, how are they going to utilize AI? That's really what I see it as and where they're going. But they tend to use the term data science. They like that term, data science for frontline workers. It's really just application. Anything else? Thoughts, ideas? They're ready. Ready for happy hour. Well, that's all I have. If you have anything else you ever want to ask me, I'm kind of an open book. I'm willing to share, help, with anything. Please feel free to contact me. But if not, thank you for sticking it out till almost 5 o'clock and enjoy your evening.